If you have just started to learn Spanish or you've been studying for a while but you're still not very sure about the basics, then it's very highly likely that you're making one of these common mistakes with your pronunciation in Spanish. But don't worry, because by the end of the video, I'm gonna make sure that you can correct them quickly and easily. And I will also share with you a very powerful strategy that I use with my students so that you can also improve in your pronunciation in Spanish and have a faster progress. If we haven't met yet, my name is Celso Gil and I help people who are relocating or retiring to Spain go from their very first words up to their first conversation so that they can connect with a local community and enjoy Spain at its best. If you are excited for this video and you think that this is exactly what you need, give me a like and make sure that you hit subscribe if you haven't done that yet so that you don't miss any of my future lessons. And before we dive in, we need to understand why working on the pronunciation is so important. And here we need to distinguish the difference between pronunciation and having an accent, because the pronunciation is the ability to make the sound in a way that you are being understood, whereas the accent will be more focused on the intonation and the rhythm of your speech. And in any case, you shouldn't forget that you're learning Spanish as a foreign language. It's not your native language. And I'm saying this because I think it's very challenging and almost impossible to speak like 100% like a native speaker when you're learning a foreign language. That shouldn't be your focus, because even native speakers have completely different accents. So we need to make sure that we differentiate when we're pronouncing something that is wrong and when we're pronouncing something with an accent that is different to what we're looking for. Those are two different things, and it's very important that you have that in your mind. So the real question that you should be asking to yourself is, do people understand me when I speak Spanish? Or do people have problems to understand me what I'm saying? If you feel that you are being understood, then you're ready to move on and work on the rhythm and the intonation of your speech. But otherwise, your priority should be on the pronunciation to make sure that people can understand and you can produce those sounds with the proper Spanish pronunciation. And this is exactly what we're gonna do today, so that people can understand what you're saying and in the end you feel confident about your Spanish. By the way, if you're starting to learn Spanish and you wanna work on the pronunciation, remember that you have a free pronunciation guide PDF that I have created for you, and you can find the link in the description. Okay, let's dive in. Vamos! The first mistake to avoid is dragging out vowels, especially the E and the O. E and O. Especially if you come from an English-speaking country, you might have realized that those vowels, the E and the O, sometimes are dragging out a lot. And in Spanish, we do not have that sound. That does not exist. I'm going to put you an example. Let's start, for example, with the letter E. So if you have a word, for example, this is the right pronunciation of it, queso in Spanish. Some people, if you come from an English-speaking country, instead of saying queso, it will drag out the E and we'll say queso. We'll add just a little bit of a Y after the E. So it's not queso, it's queso. Just focus on the vowel at the moment. Queso. E. And this is because in English, also depending on the region that you come from, the vowels can vary a lot. But in Spanish it's more standard and the vowels are just one single sound. So in this case, letter E in Spanish will be E. That's it. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds just to think about how would you read these words properly, just focusing on the vowel E. Beso, mesa, peso, beso, mesa, peso. The next vowel that can be a little bit tricky for English speakers when they pronounce in Spanish is the letter O, because in Spanish we don't have this dragging O, we just have O. Do you see the difference? O. So instead of explaining more things, let's just go directly to exercises. I'm going to give you a couple of words that you should be able to read and pronounce it properly, and I will give you the answers right after it, okay? Let's go. Are we ready? O or O. Hola. Hola. So we don't say hola, we say hola. Pero. We don't say pero, we just say pero. O. Otro. Instead of saying otro, we just say otro. O. I hope that is clear. And remember, if you're finding this helpful and you want more tips about your pronunciation, I will recommend you to check out the free PDF about the pronunciation guide that I have in the link. It goes over some of the trickiest sounds in Spanish and will help you to sound more natural when you speak in the language. Vamos al número 2. Let's go to number 2. And here we're going to forget about the vowels and focus a little bit more about the consonants and the difference between English and Spanish pronunciation. So some examples of consonants that can be tricky are the B, C, K, T sounds that in Spanish are quite different from English. So in English, when we say a word like tomato, just focus on the consonant, the letter T, the tomato, there's a lot of airflow coming out. And you can easily check that out with a piece of paper or simply with your mouth when you're pronouncing the word tomato, tomato. You could feel that there's quite a lot of air coming out when you pronounce that T sound. And this is a characteristic of the English language as well as other languages, for example, Chinese Mandarin. But in Spanish, we don't really have that airflow coming out when you're pronouncing the sounds. And it's not that there is no airflow coming out. Obviously, there is a little bit because otherwise you will not be speaking and you will just stop breathing. But there is a big difference between tomato and tomate. And if you happen to be a Chinese speaker or you're just simply interested in those different sounds with Chinese Mandarin and Spanish, I have created a good video regarding the pronunciation in Chinese and Spanish that you can check out and just have a look of it because it's also quite interesting to see those differences in terms of the sounds. So coming back to this topic, instead of saying tomate, that will be the English pronunciation to someone that is speaking Spanish, then instead of t sound, we just need to stop the airflow a little bit more and just say tomate, tomate. And another example, it could be patata. Can you guess how the English speaker will say that if they haven't really practiced the pronunciation? Patata. There you go, patata. We don't want patatas. We want patatas. And again, I'm not making fun of anybody here. Don't get me wrong. These tips are just gonna really help to adjust little things that in the end will make a big difference in the way that you pronounce the sounds in Spanish. That's all. I'm the first one that are making a lot of mistakes when I speak English, and obviously my accent and my pronunciation is not perfect, so I'm the first one that can laugh about it because in the end, I think it's funny how we pronounce things, and making mistakes is completely natural and also it's necessary to keep learning. The number 3 is the letter D, and this one can be a little bit tricky because not a lot of people really realize the difference between the D in English and the D in Spanish. So the letter D in Spanish will be pronounced like de. There's not a big difference, but to be honest, if you notice when you say D in English, somehow your tongue is a little bit backwards, whereas if you say de, the D in Spanish, the de, your tongue is basically touching your front teeth. So generally speaking, we can say that the D sound in Spanish, de, is a little bit softer and there's not a lot of airflow coming out, whereas in the letter D in English, there is a little bit of more airflow coming out. That will be the main difference. So I'm gonna just give you some examples here that you can read out loud first and then just stop the video for a second and I will tell you the answer. With more practice, you will get better and better to pronounce those Ds properly in Spanish. Are we ready? Vamos. Número 1. Digo. Número 2. Dedo. Número 3. Dado. So, digo, dedo, dado, de. Hopefully that makes sense. The 4th point that I want to address here today in this video is the letter ñ, the Spanish ñ, the special one. And here, I think a lot of people, from my experience with my students, they think that, okay, it's a new letter, everything is fine, it's exotic. And I somehow feel that they're feeling okay with the pronunciation, but really mastering the sound of ñ, I think takes a little bit longer. So hopefully these exercises and these tips will help you to master this ñes en España. The main mistake that I notice, especially when English speakers are pronouncing the ñ in Spanish, is that instead of saying ñ, it's kind of more like an N and a Y together, which is more like 2 syllables. and they split it into two different syllables, which is in the end, it's similar sound, but it's still not the real ñ. So in words, for example, like años, that would be the proper pronunciation. Años, ños. Instead of saying that, I heard a lot of people saying años, años. So años, 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 años. Do you see the difference? Hopefully that makes sense. So you can practice just basically, it's a lot of mouth movement, and you have to get your muscles exercised. And a good exercise for this is to really check out yourself in front of the mirror. It can be embarrassing, but it has to be like your face has to be similar to this. Años, ños, ños, años, la ñ de España. And we're moving on to the number 5, which is one of the big ones. The differences between the J and the G in Spanish. Ay, Dios mío, J and G, the good ones, right? You love these ones, I know. So let's dive in directly to practical exercises that you can really see the difference. Generally speaking, the letter J, J, in Spanish have a very strong sound. Depending also of your region, it can be softer, it can be more like a ha, like an H sound in English. But for example, where I come from, it's quite strong. So just for you to be aware that there might be different pronunciation, but it has to be quite strong in my opinion. And again, we're gonna read some words out loud. You read it first, you can pause the video, and in a couple of seconds I will read it out loud for you so that you can check out the answers. And the more that you practice with this, the more confident that you will feel about it. Número 1. Jamón, jamón. Número 2. Jefe, jefe. Número 3. Jirafa, jirafa. Número 4. Jueves, jueves. And the letter G can be pronounced basically in two different ways in Spanish. So we're going to split it. The first one would be ga, go, gu. Ga, ga, ga. Ga, go, gu. And the second one is similar to the J sound. Je, ji, je, ji. So if you notice, the G with the letter E or the I are pronounced the same way as the letter J. Je, ji. Some examples of this, for example, with the letter E. Can you guess how it is? Gente, gente. Or with the vowel I. Girar, girar. So for example, my surname, that you have it here. How would you pronounce it properly, now that you know it? Gil, Gil. There you go. I don't know how many times I heard my surname said Gil, which is fine. It's not a big thing. But now that you know how to pronounce it properly, there you go. So the other sound of the letter G is the G, G, G sound. And you might be wondering, okay, we have ga, go, gu, but we also have ge, gi sound. But if you want to pronounce ge and gi sound, you have to add the U between the G and the E, or the U between the G and the I. Ge, gi. So let's put that everything into practice with these wonderful words. Let's go. Número 1. Guerra, guerra. Número 2. Guitarra, guitarra. Gato, gato. Genial, genial. A lot of these tips might sound probably a little bit too specific for you, and which is completely fine. All I want for you is just to be aware of these differences, because that is the very first step for you in your pronunciation journey. Be aware of it, because once you have that awareness, you will be able to notice the difference the next time you're listening to any Spanish conversation. So the next time that you're watching a YouTube video in Spanish, or listening to music, or watching any movies in Spanish, just you can pay close attention to these sounds and just see what you notice. And the next step will be obviously start to reproducing those sounds. And the more practice that you will have, the better it will get. And a great strategy that I want to share with you, and I said it from the beginning of the video, is to just be very aware of the position of the mouth and the lips when a Spanish native speaker is speaking. And you can easily practice this strategy with any video. You mute the video and you just check out the mouth and the lips position, and you just try to reproduce the sounds that you think that are producing. And this is a great start. It takes a lot of practice, but it's a really great first step. So don't be too hard also to yourself. This is a long journey. Pronunciation is something that it takes a lot of time to develop. I can tell you, for example, my experience with English. I've been learning English for I don't know how many years in high school. And can you guess that my pronunciation was far, far, far away from my current pronunciation. It was totally different. So it's not only about the years that you're spending, but also your awareness of what are you focusing on when it comes to speaking a foreign language. And if something like more Spanish is one of your goals, then this is a great way for you to get started. Because when you're working on your pronunciation and you feel confident about it, then you will automatically feel more like talking in that language. So the more that you practice, the more that you will want to talk to native speakers, and therefore the faster that you will learn to make those adjustments in your pronunciation and in your all speaking overall. Let me know what you think about these tips, and if you think that this video was also very valuable, please feel free to share it to any of your friends or someone that you think that will really need this for their Spanish journey. This is all I want, to help as much people as possible with my expertise and my passion, and hopefully you could get started to, pronouncing those sounds in Spanish in a better way and feel confident very soon. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video y nos vemos en el próximo video. Adiós.